does it mean, this idea of less is more? Well, let me ask you this. How many of you in this room have ever read something or been given an instruction or seen something, maybe from a film, or heard something in music that just was so complicated it completely got you lost? Put your hand up. Pretty much everybody in this room, put your hand down. How many of you have been told something by an adult or a peer that just sent your head spinning and you understood the crux of the matter, you understood the basic thing they wanted you to do, but you thought that they got way too bogged down in unnecessary detail? Raise your hand. Put your hands down. Then this talk is going to apply directly to you. I call it When Less is More, the Power of Keeping It Pithy. Now, I want to preface this with saying that, yes, there are so many times when I actually think that more can be more, whether it's more instruments in a symphony, or more players on a team, or more action in a film. But I really do think that, for the most part, there is an art to keeping it short, to keeping it simple. And along the ideas of keeping it, of creating something, the whole theme of today, if you are trying to create something, I think keeping it simple is the best place to start, and it can be more powerful and more beautiful than getting overwhelmed with complications. So the first thing is, I have 3 basic rules when I'm creating something: to keep it simple and to keep it pithy. Pithy means short and brief, by the way, in case you weren't aware. Number 1, focus on the bare essentials, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about all 3 of these after I give you them. Number 2, don't get bogged down in unnecessary details. Number 3, if it's too hard to explain in 3 to 4 sentences, then it's probably too much. What do I mean by all 3 of these things? Whether you're writing something, whether you're writing a paper, or you're trying to create a song, or you're trying to do any kind of thing that involves your creation, you want to start, I think, with these 3 basic things: to keep it simple, keep it obvious. There's something going on in the movie industry. I'm a very big movie buff. I love films, I love cinema. Something that's very near and dear to me is the Star Wars saga. And there's something going on in the movie industry that I think is a bad example of breaking these rules, and that is endless movie sequels, endless long-running TV shows, or songs that go on for too long. Let me give you an example. We're going to use Star Wars as an example. What is the basic plot of the original Star Wars film? The good guys have to stop the bad guys from blowing up a planet. If you want to zoom in on that a little bit, the plot of that is Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star. Simple, right? Memorable. Still to this day, 40 years later, a movie that's ingrained in our culture. Even if you haven't seen the film, you probably know what I'm talking about. Okay, let's take the most recent Star Wars, which is the 8th or 9th, depending on how you're keeping count, film in the series. What's the plot of the new Star Wars movie? Well, there's the good guys and the bad guys, and then there's another guy, and a girl is trying to do a thing, and it's kind of difficult to follow, right? And it might be a great, exciting action movie, but I don't think in 20 years from now, or even 40 years from now, we're going to be talking about that the way we're talking about the original. Same thing happens with TV shows. They start to run out of ideas, and instead of trying to just recycle things over and over, they come up with new ideas, and I think they go too far sometimes, right? Let's not just talk about movies, though. Let's look at some examples, okay? A writing example, because this is probably most relevant to you. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but I'm actually working on writing my own musical from start to scratch, and I'm having a good time doing it. I'm going to give you an excerpt from a piece of a scene that was my first draft in this musical. The musical is about a band director who teaches middle school, something I probably would know a little bit about. His name is Mr. Anderson. And I'm not going to tell you anything about this scene. I'm just going to show you the dialogue that I had written originally for Mr. Anderson in this scene, okay? Mr. Anderson's a bright guy. He's no dummy. And he says, boys and girls, I don't fully comprehend your devised attitudes towards your continued musical involvement here at your educational institute. Is there a reason you would not have me perform another daily duty sans my conducting baton? What? Right? Kind of confusing, right? Raise your hand if you're a little lost by what he's saying. Yeah, put your hands down. Now, there are some great vocab words in there. Sure, sans is one, maybe even devised. He's talking about educational institution, right? No, we're not going to use this. I read that and I thought, this is not basic. And I thought to myself, what is he trying to say? What is something that's just going to cut through everything and make it obvious? How about this? Why do you want to quit performing in band? Do you think I'd be a better teacher in another subject area? Boom. How many people follow that one? A lot simpler, isn't it? Right? Keeping it pithy, keeping it short. Avoiding any unnecessary things. Let's think back to the first rule I said, the bare essentials. All I wanted to get across to the audience in this scene is that the students want Mr. Anderson to stop teaching band and teach another area because they want to quit his class. And you learn everything you need to know just from those 2 sentences. I didn't even have to tell you that was the setup to the scene. Without going on with unnecessary $2 words and crazy run-on sentences, keep it simple, keep it direct, right? Let's look at another one. We're going to use something that's not a writing example, okay? A written or spoken instructions. Whether you're giving them to a peer, whether a teacher is giving them to you, or whether you're trying to come up with something, maybe you have a project where people have to follow some sort of scientific method. All right, let's use something simple, something if you've been in my class you may have heard me say. Go to my office. It's the room in the middle. Please grab my iPad charger from under the desk. Be careful. Simple, right? We got in, we got out. Simple sentence, direct, right? If we weren't abiding by keeping it pithy, somebody who's a little bit more long-winded might say something like, go across the room 14 steps, then enter the room in the middle. You'll pass several posters on the wall. Ugh, no way. Unnecessary information. Now, granted, there is a time when this would be great. Maybe if you're reading a Dickens novel or something that Shakespeare wrote, they do have an art to making it long and making it beautiful. But guess what? We aren't Charles Dickens. We aren't William Shakespeare. We got to keep it simple, keep it direct. What's the point? The point is, I want my iPad charger because I'm using it to conduct. We're not going to use this one. Silly, right? Let's go on to a third example. This is the whole point of what I want to do up here today. We're going to give you a musical example. Now, how many of you have ever considered maybe writing a song? Put your hand up. That's a lot of hands. Put your hand down. How many of you have ever considered writing a short story, or how many of you have ever written a short story maybe in one of your classes? Put your hands up. Excellent. Well, I'm going to give you some tips about how to keep it simple using music. The first song I'm going to use is Twinkle Little Star. And you might laugh and say, well, that's kind of silly. I know that song. You all know the melody. It goes like this. Memorable, right? And this is so woven into the fabric of American culture and everyday life. I dare say there's probably not a single person who doesn't know this theme. Now, that's just the melody. We can make it as complex or as simple as we want with harmony. I'm a jazz pianist, so I might want to do something kind of crazy with it. What's the problem with this? It's very musical. It could even be considered virtuosic by some, but it's not memorable. It's not simple. What's the point? Twinkle, little star. Now, maybe if I was at a jazz lecture, I might say, this is a great example of how to improvise. But no, let's go back and let's apply the most basic, simple harmonies to it. And you see, it works with just easy chords that you learn when you're a young child learning piano or learning an instrument. You're going to remember the second one a lot more easily than you're going to remember the first one. And you can do this with anything, whether you're writing, take a look at what you're writing and scale it back. What's going to make it memorable? What's going to get the point across? It's a song about a star twinkling in the sky. You don't need any more than that. Stars aren't doing crazy jazz dances and everything like that, right? Let's look at another example with the guitar. I used to play in a rock band for years, and our band name was Chopper Pilot. And everything I did in this band was centered around that principle of less is more. We only had two people in the band, a guitar and a drummer, and we both sang. I would sing the lead, he would sing harmonies. We had no bass player, no keyboard player. And we would challenge ourselves. And I would say, in this day and age where everything's trying to sound so complicated, how many of you have heard a song on the radio and just said, the production is just too complicated, right? Whether it's a pop song or something, you just go, they added too much, it would just make it simple. We would challenge ourselves to come up with something as basic but as memorable as possible. And one of my favorite things that we ever wrote was a song called Rooftop Dance Party. And we only used two chords. And I want to play a little bit of it for you so you can get the feel of what it was like. Much more memorable than what I was doing 2 minutes ago with Twinkle Little Star. Chances are you can probably groove to that. And the lyrics were really simple too. He went, she's standing next to me. This is our newest style. We got the shifty eyes. Were we supposed to smile? Simple stuff. Smile, eyes, clothing, right? Very simple. Didn't do any kind of crazy rap or anything else. Then it came time for the guitar solo. And my first instinct as a musician was, let me do the craziest, wildest guitar solo that I can do. So let me give you an example of my first, the first solo that we tracked onto the tape. I have a little pedal here that's going to loop back what I played. So here was the first solo I came up with. Crazy and wild, but it has no real emotion to it, does it? It's just kind of me flailing around, playing as fast as I can, playing notes. It might have been really cool, yeah, metal. But the solo we ended up putting on the record was a lot simpler and actually based off of the three notes that I was singing and the chords. Listen to this and tell me if this has more emotional impact than what I just played. Pretty simple. So the power of keeping it pithy. Simple, direct, unadorned, doesn't have to be virtuosic, whether you're writing something, whether you're listening to something, whether you're giving a speech. You'll notice I've kept it simple too, with no crazy pictures. And there's a time for that. No crazy, everything I've got up here is black and white. Keep it simple, keep it focused, get your point in, get your point out. And hopefully with those, you can keep it simple, keep it pithy, and keep it beautiful, and it'll inspire you to create something. Don't be scared by the daunting process of creation, because you start simple and you move out from there. And that is that. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.